This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Wednesday, January the 24th, 2024. So glad you could join us. Coming up a little later in the program in our news headlines, we're going to meet the new Iowa Pork Producers Association president, and we'll also hear from Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig about some poultry processing legislation moving in the State House. But first, let's go ahead and run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. We're at the end of another trading day, and it's time to talk with Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net. And Robin, soybeans started out a little bit to the low side, but it looks like at least by midday they had rebounded. Were they able to hold on to that?
Well, into the close here, we had a little bit of weakness in a few of the contracts. Yeah, it was soybeans struggled much of the day, I would have to say. Not a lot of news per se underneath that market. Corn was stronger, held that way for much of the day. No specific reason for that either. The one thing that is not a concern, I should say, in the market, but one thing in that corn market is their funds have record short positions. So, but whatever would trigger some short covering, we don't know. But the strong one today was wheat. And that pushed higher double-digit gains into the close. Seemed like a lot of that maybe had to do with the weather coming through there over the next day or so, ice storms in part of that southern plains area. Because on the other side of the spectrum, there was a consulting firm out of Russia, Sovicon, raised wheat production to 92.2 million metric tons this year. So that's almost 1 million metric tons higher than what their previous estimate was. So that is going to provide more competition out into the world. But the wheat was stronger. I think it's a reaction based off of uncertainty over, if that's going to have a real impact, on the wheat production as well. It's too early to tell that, and I don't know if they have some snow cover. It's not going to be that much of an issue right now. Now, Farm Futures had a survey out today that showed corn acreage this upcoming year at 92.8 million acres. It would be the second highest or second largest crop or for acres wise. It's down 1.8 million acres from 2023. Soybean acres at 85 million acres, up 1.6% from 2023, and wheat acres of 48 million, down 3% from last year. Now, that's way early to tell. I mean, we're still in winter yet, but we are seeing some of these projections being made. A lot can change from there, so I wouldn't hang my hat on that one too much at this point in time. Now, ethanol production on the weekly EIA report was quite a surprise. Their ethanol production was 818,000 barrels for the week. It was down 236,000 barrels from last week. Now, the average estimates for ethanol was 100. What came out at 818 was practically 134,000 barrels below the average trade estimate. That's pretty substantial, and that's the lowest weekly production for this time of year in 6 years. Now, on the ethanol stocks, they were 25.8 million barrels, up 100,000 barrels, and the highest weekly stocks for this time of year over the past 6 years as well. Now, you got to remember, it's this time of year, not the highest for any point in time during the year, but for this time of year. So that was pretty substantial. The last time we saw a significant drop in the ethanol production was in 2021-22. Shortly after this period of time, uncertain as to why that happened at that point in time, but this was pretty dramatic. That's probably tied to a lot to the weather scenario, reduced production. And so that's has impact on some of our corn demand, at least for that period of time.
All right, so then switching gears over to the livestock side of things. I know we had an up day yesterday. Hogs started off a little bit to the low side. Did that hold out, or what was the story there in hogs and cattle?
Well, we'll start with the hogs. They had a follow-through. Started out a little bit slow this morning, but had follow-through, moved into triple-digit gains as we went into the close. Yesterday, we had a large day, and that moved through price resistance on the charts, and that's what fueled some of that short covering and more buying interest. Little caution this morning, but that gained some steam as we move through the day. Now, probably a big portion of that might have been from China looking at reducing some of their hog production due to persistent outbreaks of the African swine fever, and mainly in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a little bit different than China, but that hope, there's hope that could increase some of their import demand from the U.S. And so even though that hasn't been anything for sure, the trade works on, or the futures market works on, what potentially can happen in the future. So we had two nice strong days there with the with that probably fueling some of that fire. Now, supporting that, we don't know where it's going to end up yet today, but the daily direct morning cash for hogs was up $3.94. That's huge. We normally don't see that strength in the cash market on the day. Yesterday it was up a little bit, but that would be huge. I don't think it's going to hold there, but if we see anything remotely close to that, that's going to be pretty supportive. And cutouts at the midday report were up $2.19. So both of those things would be fairly supportive to that market, where the rally yesterday was more technically induced, not fundamentally. Now the increase today could be more fundamentally induced. Now on the cattle side, the trend remains higher. It's a slow trend up. And today we had bids in the south at 174, with feedlots holding out at 176. So nothing was done yet today, which is usual. You generally see business till Thursday or Friday. Asking prices in the north on a dressed basis were at 276 with no bids. Now boxed beef was a little concerned today. The choice was down $1.12 and select down $1.54 at the midday report. Now we've seen some really strong boxed beef prices over the last about week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, indicating stronger demand. Some of that was because of the weather. And then, the retailers wanted to get some of the beef in order to get into their stores. And we had lower production because of slaughter schedules being disrupted. And so now it's but possibly that getting this back on track again, that we might be seeing a little bit of setback in the boxed beef. Now, choice, even with a setback, still would be holding above $300, which we haven't seen an increase in choice above $300 for the last 2 months. So that is going to be a little bit of a concern, but I don't think it's really going to put a whole lot of pressure on that market. I think the market's looking past that, and we are seeing a slow trend higher, but we didn't see quite the gains as we saw in hogs, and we didn't see quite the gains in cattle as we saw yesterday.
All right. Well, a lot of things to think about for our producers. And if they want to talk with the folks at agmarket.net, maybe get some ideas of what they should be thinking about here in the early parts of 2024, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, they can call me directly if they would like at 877-256-3253, or go to our website, agmarket.net. There's an 844 number there. Somebody will be glad to help you.
All right, Robin. Well, thanks so much for the insight. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
That again was Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net. Let's go ahead and take a look at the closing numbers. Those come to us from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen. At the close, March corn was up 5 3/4 at 4.52 1/4. Soybeans closed up 3/4 of a cent at 12.40 1/4. Soy meal up $2.20 at 3.6330. Soy oil down 89 cents at 47.32. Chicago wheat up 14 1/4 at 6.10 3/4. Kansas wheat up 8 1/4 at 6.25 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat up 5 1/2 at 7.04 1/2, and oats down 4 1/2 at 3.65 3/4. February live cattle up 70 cents at 175.35. March feeders up 12 cents at 233.77. Lean hogs closed up 60 cents at 73.90. Pork cutouts down 40 cents. That's at $87. And that's been our market recap. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. And when we come back, we're going to run down those Ag News headlines. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AMPM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, Washington County pig farmer Matt Gent is the new president of the Iowa Pork Producers Association. He took over the role during the organization's annual meeting here in Des Moines on January 23rd. Gent and his family own a farrow-to-finish swine enterprise called Prairie Pork near Wellman. They also grow corn and soybeans. Gent serves the IPPA president-elect last year and replaces Trish Cook of Winthrop, who now holds the position of past president and the IPPA board of directors. Cook was the first female president in IPPA's history. Gent praised Cook for her leadership during a very difficult year for pork producers. Both Gent and Cook will serve one-year terms in their new roles. Carroll County pig farmer Aaron Juergens is now the IPPA president-elect. Elsewhere, Iowa Agriculture Secretary Mike Naig talked with the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network today about a program helping in the State House for modernizing poultry processing facilities. A lack of language in federal law has created a little bit of a hiccup that doesn't affect the processes of beef and pork. The secretary explains more.
It's really part of the overall effort to increase the processing capacity for livestock and for meat in the state of Iowa. And one particular area is around poultry. What we have found is we've talked with folks is poultry processing in Iowa is, it's pretty sparse. And we really are digging into why. And so first and foremost, it's a workforce challenge. It takes a lot of labor to run these facilities. But another is that we ran into a something that just shouldn't be the case, and that's that the federal government actually has rules that prevent a meat locker. So you can choose in the state of Iowa if you want to be an official or a custom plant. Official plants can then have product that gets sold retail, or producer could process at that locker and then sell to somebody else. And a custom is where you take something into the locker, you take it back home. It's primarily for your use. On the red meat side, a locker can be an official plant, but can still choose to do custom work. If you're a poultry plant, you have to pick one or the other. That's just silly, because we know that first of all, again, because of that high cost of operating a poultry processor, really they should have all options available to them, and certainly the federal government shouldn't be imposing these kinds of restrictions, unnecessary restrictions on them. So we're asking for that clarification in Iowa law. At the same time, asking for this to be worked on. We're working with Congressman Feenstra and the congressional delegation on seeing if we can get a federal relief as well. But we just want to really open this up and say, if you want to be a poultry processor in the state of Iowa, you've got all the options available to you, and make the best business decision for you.
The secretary says it's a little bit of a head scratcher as to why this language was left out of poultry processing.
We started to dig into that, and in federal law, red meat lockers explicitly in law says you can do both, but there's no mention at all in the poultry provisions within law. So we actually believe that it's allowed, and that's why we're pushing for this legislation, is to really call the question. So it really comes down to an interpretation by USDA on this. And I don't exactly know why. Why wouldn't you have done both back whenever they did that many, many decades ago? But here we stumbled across something that we think needs to be fixed, and we're going to go try to fix it.
And that's been a rundown of our news headlines. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified each time we put out new video content. Also, don't forget about our free market podcast through Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. Those are coming out right now twice a day. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Mark Magnuson, Riley Smith, and Andy Peterson, I thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.